Don't forget to subscribe. Afterwards, the wisest and most spiritual books from the greatest authors await you every day. And now buckle up, sit back and we'll begin. Hayat Inayat Khan. In an Eastern rose garden. The effect of prayer. Keen study of life enables us to perceive that every individual is dependent upon every other. This is true of all aspects of life. The rich are dependent upon the poor, the strong upon the weak, the wise upon the foolish. When we see how limited man is even at his best, we see that it cannot be otherwise than that each one must depend upon another in order to obtain the needs of life. It is evident that the servant is dependent upon the wages that are paid him, that the worker is dependent on the money he receives. But there are needs which money cannot meet, and then he who receives repays by love or kindness or care. Times come when money is too poor, when influence is powerless to buy or take. When this is so, the natural thing is to pay respect and give adoration to the one to whom money cannot be given, and who cannot be influenced. It does not matter whether the respect and adoration are given with a selfish or an unselfish motive, in either case there is the same dependence. One is dependent upon one's beloved, or upon one's wife, or upon one's neighbor, even upon one's servant. How many troubles and difficulties begin if that servant happens not to be at home? Whether one pays money, or whether one can only show love and adoration, one is dependent just the same. From the time when one first opens one's eyes as an infant, one's life is nothing but dependence all through. Those who watch keenly will see what is real dependence, and how far-reaching that dependence is in our lives. Those who need money, are they not dependent on people who have money? Those who desire position, are they not dependent upon someone who has position, such as a Secretary of State, a lord, a duke, a high official? The more a man reflects, the vaster does he find this web of dependence to be. It becomes more and more clear that all the sources upon which people depend exist for the use of the different individuals. One individual desires or needs wealth, and therefore there are people who have it, and he can be dependent upon them. Another may desire or need a rise in position, therefore there is someone who is in a high position, who can distinguish him or place him in a higher position. He will bow to this one, he will respect him, he will do anything to gain his favor and kindness. When we discern that every individual has some different source of power before which he bows, to which he turns, on which he is dependent, we begin to ask whether there is any one source which is supreme above all these other sources of power. These various sources depend on one another. Is there one which reigns over all? And the answer is that there is one. There is a source which reigns over all other sources of power, and it is this one source which we idealize and name God. Those who idealize this source call upon him, pay all their respect to him, turn to him in every difficulty, in every trouble, in every case of need. There is no one else who will suffice to console them, there is no means of assistance, no help to be obtained. But this one ideal on which they fix their eyes, this ideal which is not known nor seen, yet is idealized in the mind. How poor all other sources are compared with that one source. Whereas all the various sources before which men bow and on which men depend are so uncertain that today they are kind, and tomorrow they are not, yet that one source is all sufficient, never changing, and almighty. From that source all things can be obtained. All other sources are only apparent powers, for after all, even if they do succeed in giving any help, it is still really the one source that has given them the power to provide our needs. The Nizam of Hyderabad was a great mystic and a very good man. He used to say to those who had obtained access to him and had made a complaint of not having yet received help, "Have you got an order from there? If you have got one from there, I will give you help, but if have not got it from there, I will not help you." In the Quran there is a surah which says, "God alone is rich, and all are poor." The more we study life, the more we see the truth of this surah. People may live in palaces endowed with all manner of wealth and comfort, and yet they can still feel, "If only I had that, I would never be unhappy again." People may have their matorkers, their furs, their wealth of millions, and yet cannot truthfully say they are perfectly happy. Can they say they have all that they need in life? Is there anyone who can say this? You are more likely to find such a one among the poor than among the wealthy. This shows that God alone is rich. Whoever has need is poor. Poverty means need. As long as there is need, there is poverty. Since man's life is full of needs, he must be in poverty. He is still in darkness if he does not realize that there is only one who is rich. Undoubtedly, we all of us have our needs through life. How often do we experience disappointment regarding them? How many are disappointed in love, in money, in help, in service? How apt is the heart to be discouraged, disappointed, broken, feeling, "Oh, this is my brother, my only brother, and yet he has not helped me in this hour of need. I looked on her as my sister, and yet she has failed me at this crucial time." People meet so many disappointments in life. One depends on limited sources, never reflecting that these sources can only sometimes be helpful, and that often they are quite unable to help, however much they may desire to do so. There remains the one source which is always helpful and can always help. It is only because man does not see him, does not realize him, that he doubts whether there is such a being as God. However religious or pious he is, he always looks to a material agent for help. However religious or pious, he cannot explain God. Not even a mystic or philosopher can explain him. The ideal of God is the first lesson that must be learned, and it cannot be learned by analysis. Therefore, the intellectual mind which seeks for an analysis of God is always sure to be disappointed. The philosopher spoke truly when he said, "To analyze God is to dethrone God." Analysis can never portray even the ideal of God. That is why every messenger, Muhammad, Christ, Moses, Abraham, emphasized the one word: faith. But one should not think that these seers and holy ones and teachers who had such power and realization wanted the world to imagine that this faith should be blind. They themselves learned the first lesson that it is no use beginning with the idea that if one analyzes God, one will come to believe in him. Such a one will never believe. The first step is faith, and not reasoning or intellectual perception. Can one explain why it is that a diamond is worth £20,000? Is there any reason for this? Yes, a person will say, it is because it is sold in the market for that price. There is no other explanation. It is a precious stone. But another may say, yes, it is a bright stone. No doubt it is better than glass, and it is certainly brighter than a crystal. But why £20,000? The answer is just this, that it is worth £20,000 because our ideal has made it so. What we call an ideal is only another way of saying that there is no explanation. We have to accept it that £20,000 is its value. It is the same with every ideal, even with the ideal of God. An ideal is beyond explanation. The mystery of breath. To a mystic, the subject of breath is the deepest of all the subjects with which mysticism or philosophy is concerned, because breath is the most important thing in life. The very life of man is breath. He lives in the presence of breath, and in the absence of breath man is called a corpse. After death the organs of the body are just the same as before, the only thing that is lacking is breath. Breath is that within ourselves which keeps all the parts of the body in connection with one another, working together, depending upon one another. It is that which enables man to move, to put his muscles into action, to keep the whole mechanism of the body at work. There is no other force or power concerned with all this than the power of breath. Mystics know that it is regularity of breath that brings good health, that irregularity of breath is the cause of all illness. Many teachers and students of physical culture know that it is not the exercises and practices of this culture that cause the muscles to develop, that impart strength and vigor to the body. They know, as did the ancient mystics in India, that it is a matter of the breath. To practice for one moment with the help of the breath will do more than a whole day's exercises carried on without considering the help of the breath. In the latter case the muscles cannot be developed, whereas in the former case, the physical body is easily developed with little physical practice. That this is true is easily shown by looking at the porters at railway stations in India. If physical labor were the only thing needed to develop muscles, would they not all be veritable sandos? In India we can study particularly well how men work with heavy things. Sometimes a man will carry on his shoulder a burden that it would ordinarily be impossible for a man of his physique to carry. Yet such a man can not only lift it, but he will walk with it. And when one watches him one will find that the secret lies in his way of breathing. If he did not breathe correctly he could not possibly carry such a weight over the shortest distance. There was in India a man called Ramamurti. He could lift elephants and stop motorcars running at speed. When this man, who was not extraordinary in build, was asked where he got his gigantic strength, for he looked like an ordinary human being, not like a monster, he said, "You know, and yet you do not know." The secret lies in the breath, which is all power. As man cannot see it, he does not believe in the possibility of breath-giving power. He attaches importance only to the things he can see, hear and touch. He is so material that he cannot see anything beyond what his physical eyes are able to see. He is like a blind person who can only feel and not see. He cannot see that strength is something greater than a rock. How difficult it is for a man to perceive the truth of the Bible saying, which says that faith will remove mountains. He thinks that mountains are stronger than faith. He wonders how faith can be stronger than the rocks and the mountains. Man cannot lift the mass of a mountain, surely the mountain is stronger than faith. The idea is too subtle, too fine for him to understand. And it is the same with all other fine and subtle things in life. So much more importance is given to the study of the material sciences, while the spiritual, the higher knowledge, is neglected. More importance is always given to the development of bodily strength. Therefore, when a man goes to the seaside, often the first thing he does is weigh himself, so he can find out how many pounds he has gained during his holiday. He never thinks how little time it will take to lose all the pounds again. The weight he has gained at the seaside he will lose again. He does not understand that it is energy that makes a person move and feel active and in good health, not the bodily weight. Is it not true that the addition of weight to the body makes him feel lazy and comfort-seeking, and often results in illness? And yet how pleased how many people are when they have gained in weight. Then we consider the mind, we find that breath has to do with mind also. The mystic knows that the breath which we perceive by inhaling and exhaling through the nostrils is not the essential breath, but only the result of a current which runs not only through the body, but also through all the planes of man's existence. That which the nostrils feel is the result of the activity of breath. Were it not so, we could not explain how the mind, which is so much vaster and finer than the body, and is a separate element, can possibly exert an effect on the body, and the body on the mind. Every passion, every emotion has its effect upon the mind, and every change of mind, however slight, has its effect upon a man's body. Physicians in all ages have recognized that consumption is often the outcome of constant worry. What keeps mind and body connected? What keeps the mind always active? What gives the mind its vigor to create imaginations, to create thoughts, and not only to create them, but to retain them by the faculty we call memory, to keep the knowledge gained by the faculty we call reason? To possess emotions which can sometimes be felt and sometimes not felt? Where does the mind keep all these things? What force can it be that is behind them all? Is it not the breath? That is why the mystic studies and realizes and masters the breath, in order to master not only the physical body, but also the mind. From the mystical point of view, it is evident that there is some strength, some current, some affinity, which runs through and binds together all the trees and plants in a forest, and which also causes the desert to be without them, which causes the coal mine to have coal, the gold mine to have gold, the sulfur mine to have sulfur in them. The strength, or force, draws all these elements together. So it is too with the tides of the sea. It accounts for the waters running in the same direction, where at first they tended towards the south, the east, the west, or the north. It accounts for the surface of the waves keeping a rhythm. Wherever we look, be it the changes of the seasons, the changes of the weather, or even the constant circles which the earth describes on its journey, all these show the same underlying current, the current of the whole of nature, which is the real breath. The whole universe is going on with a certain rhythm. There is a current which keeps the whole universe going. It is one breath, and yet it is many breaths. There is a tide which is a cycle of 40 days, and a tide which is a cycle of 7 days, and another of 30 days, and yet at every moment waves are rising and falling. There is a wave under the wave, and a wave over the wave. There is a tide that turns twice a day, and also a tide which turns once a month. So is it with breath. One breath, and yet many breaths. Then consider how the trees keep together. One tree, and yet its branches and its fruits and its flowers all turn in different directions. Every branch takes a different direction, and yet all keep together. What is it that directs the vigor and the strength of one branch and not the others in that direction, for they are all attached to the same tree stem? Is it not that life current which runs through it that directs their ways? As long as it runs through a tree, it produces fruit and flowers. So it is with animals and birds and man. The same current of life runs through all. Man is the ideal being, as the scripture says. He is ideal because intelligence is given to him to perceive the secret of this breath, whereas from animals and birds it is hidden. The life of all creatures is mysterious and full of wonder, but man alone is blessed with the intelligence, which conveys the power of understanding the secret of the breath. If there is anything more lasting than our transitory life, it is this, the secret of our being. It is by this that man is able to master life both here and in the hereafter. Having understood this truth, mystics have been able to teach that the religion of all religions is the knowledge of self, for the knowledge of self brings the knowledge of life. This life current which runs through the center of man's being, attaching mind to body and all other planes of existence as well, it is this that is all important. It passes from man's innermost being out to the body, which is the instrument whereby man is able to experience life on the surface. When he has knowledge of this, man begins to realize, I am not as small as I had thought, not as weak as I had thought, I am much stronger on other planes. I can live much longer than I could on the physical plane. I can see myself on all the different planes by means of that inner knowledge called the breath. Therefore, to the mystic, breath is like a lift in which he rises up to the first floor, and then to the second, and then to the third floor, in fact wherever he wishes to go. The mystery of the Sphinx and the mystery of Burak, which is mentioned in the life of the Prophet Muhammad, has to do with this. When the Prophet reached the court, or gate, of God, the Burak was sent. The Burak was an animal with wings, and the Prophet rode upon it in order to reach the gate of the highest heaven. He passed through gate after gate as he passed the 7 heavens. In the end he arrived at the gate of the highest. What does this allegory mean? The body of this Burak is this physical body. The wings represent the ability of the breath to reach far, and yet retain its physical connection with the body. The Prophet mounting upon its back represents any soul who treads the spiritual path. Whoever has courage, whoever has faith, whoever has confidence, whoever has trust, whoever has patience and hope and perseverance, can tread this path and make use of the vehicle of the breath. If we read the history of the Buddha, who was a yogi, we shall find that without yoga and without spiritual meditation, which is accomplished by breath, no one in this world has ever attained spiritual perfection. The healing power of Christ, the magnetism of Muhammad, the miraculous power of Moses, the charm of Krishna, and the inspiration of Buddha, all these were attained by breath. And how did they attain them if there were not a current passing between us on the earth and the source of energy, the source of power and magnetism? Is it not plain that breath conveys even the words which go out from our lips to the ears of the hearer? The voice is breath. The word is breath. Without breath, speech cannot be produced. And yet a person may easily accept this and acknowledge that it is true that it is breath that does this, but he will not willingly believe that thought also is breath. He can see the movement of air, which arises from speech, and he wonders if it is meant that thought also causes a movement in the air. This is because he does not understand that a life current runs through it all, and that is breath. It is easily seen when it manifests itself upon the physical plane, but on the higher planes it is not seen. Yet, it extends higher than the planes. If there is anything that connects man with God, if there is anything that connects the mortal with the immortal, it is this bridge which we call breath. It is a bridge whereby to pass from the world of mortality to the world of immortality. It is the bridge whereby immortality passes down to mortality. That life which seems mortal is really the ray of immortal life. What seems mortal is only the shell. It is not life that is mortal, it is the cover that makes it seem mortal. From the time when man first perceived that there was a secret in breath, he has wanted to use his understanding of the secret in order to be able to perform wonders and reach the spirits, to master the elements, read thoughts, convey thoughts, and to perform any psychic or occult phenomena. But to seek to do these things is to give pearls to buy pebbles. How wasteful to spend life in gaining these powers when breath is the rope that takes us from this mortal plane to immortality, that saves us from the struggles and worries of this transitory life, and leads us to the happiness and joy and peace for which every soul longs. If breath can accomplish these pearls, will it not also accomplish the small things, the pebbles, the worldly needs? Yes, it will. After all, to have performed a few wonders is nothing. One man is perhaps striving all day to earn his own bread so that he may live in a comfortable manner. Another is always worrying about how to maintain himself and his children. Another is thinking, what can I do to save my fellow man from his trouble? If we compare these people, in order to see who is the greatest, we see that he is greatest whose ideal is greatest. When we consider that great heroes of the past and present, those whom we admire and to whom we look with hope for right guidance, we shall find that what has made them great has been the greatness of their ideal. The lower the ideal, the less the efforts. The higher the ideal, the greater the life. If we use all our intelligence and strength and wisdom to accomplish some little thing, it is only a waste of life. To consider what great things one can accomplish, to seek to do those things which will be most useful and valuable to others, that is the ideal life. The man who has earned money only to keep himself comfortable, what has he accomplished with his life? If he has just gratified his wish to roam about in a motorcar, to set up a comfortable home, to have people waiting upon him, he cannot be happy because he has not accomplished anything with his life. He may possess many houses, he may possess much money in the bank, he may make a great name. But it will amount to nothing in comparison with the man whose power is greater than all wealth, position, or fame. Such a man will be much happier with the small things of the world. He has gained that peace with which the pleasures and transitory joys of this earth offer no comparison. The one life is like the lips touching a cup of delicious wine. The other life is like drinking the whole cup full of heavenly wine. What a difference between just touching the wine with the lips and drinking it. The pleasures of life are like touching the wine. The experience of these pleasures is only like a dream, a passing joy. It comes and goes again. One longs for the joy of that little pleasure to stay. But how can it stay? Even if one tried for thousands of years, one could not keep the happiness which is external. The only way to obtain the eternal bliss is to do as the mystics do, and to rise by the aid of the breath from plane to plane, finding greater joy and greater happiness. It resembles the taking of a drug. A person may sit in meditation and dream and imagine he is very happy. A materially minded person may easily say that a meditative person hypnotizes himself into thinking he is full of joy, but is it not hypnotism when a little world of flattery pleases one, when a little silver and gold produces such a change of expression in one's countenance? The materialist, not understanding this, will laugh at the mystic and call him a dreamer, but if the mystic is a dreamer, what is the worldly man? Is he not a dreamer too? What produces the joy in these things that are of no importance? If it is good to be hypnotized by silver and gold, is it not better when the mystic is hypnotized by his divine ideal of perfection? The silver and gold will certainly be snatched away. At least the mystic's ideal of God will last. When we consider how this life and our environment can cramp and restrict us, we understand how it is that with all our hopes we still seek solitude, try to be by ourselves, and close our eyes to all the passing things. The life and activity which are directed to experiencing the pleasures of life, the transitory sources of joy and pleasure, all fade away before that which we seek in solitude, where we strive to reach the inner and enduring things. Even if our bed is comfortable, if our house contains all the comforts that the heart can desire, the mind still goes through all manner of torments, and sleep will not come. We may take a little rest and sit still in order to obtain peace. But the real trouble never goes. It is to drown this trouble that people take drugs and intoxicants and lose themselves in the pursuit of common things, however undesirable. Everybody strives to obtain some remedy which will enable him to realize the joy and pleasure and peace which his inner life unconsciously seeks. But he cannot get it. If he tries to obtain it through drugs or intoxicants, he only becomes a slave to them. If, failing these, he seeks to gain his desire through other vices, he will never find the contentment he seeks. Come to the mystic, then, and sit with him when you are tired of all these other remedies that you have employed in vain. Come and take a glass of wine with him. The mystic wine is the inner absorption, which removes all the worries and anxieties and troubles and cares of the physical and mental plane. All these are now done away with forever. It is the mystic who is at rest. It is he who experiences that happiness which others do not experience. It is he who teaches the way to attain that peace and happiness which are the original heritage of man's soul. Character and fate. When a person hears that an influence is exerted on fate by character, he at once wonders how far this can be true with regard to those whom he sees to be well off and in favorable circumstances. He dare not think that their degree of rank and wealth could be attained by good character and its effects. This is the first stumbling block which man meets with. When he begins to idealize or admire a character, he has his practical benefit before his eyes. And when he asks himself, "Shall I gain anything from a practical point of view?" the heavenly bliss is disregarded. The first thing he thinks about is his fate. If only I could have good fortune. If he gets all he wants by having a good character, he is at once disturbed by the disappointment of finding that the actual facts do not agree. If it is in business, for instance, surely it is constant application which brings success, and not the personal character. If we considered that good fortune lies in the achievement of worldly power, or of wealth or position, this would be the poorest fortune. However high a person is in rank, however great the wealth he possesses, and whatever position in life he occupies, these have nothing to do with his happiness and satisfaction of mind. It is fate that has to do with happiness and satisfaction. Even if a person be living in a palace, his heart may still be in torment from morning to night. Is that enjoying a good fate? He has 1,000 difficulties, his own longings are his enemies. Is that good fortune? Happiness may exist in a cottage. Yet one who suffers from lack of money says, "What good fortune the rich man has." But the rich man says to himself, "All they want is to get what they can out of me. They are waiting till I close my eyes in order that they may inherit what I possess." Many minds are constantly working against me. And is health good luck? Is a healthy man also the possessor of a mind at rest? Is his heart satisfied? But if good fortune does not consist of these things, are they then desirable? Surely they are desirable, but can we say they are the only good fortune that we can attain? Can we say that they are the only things that can satisfy our need in life? It is only when we lack wealth or health that we say good fortune lies in them. Yet when we attain them we find we are still not satisfied. Therefore it must be something else that constitutes good fortune. It is not being very religious or pious. It consists in the attainment of what we wish, what we desire, and what we would choose to have. What do we desire? All things that seem to us best according to our evolution. These we think we desire and wish to have and consider to be good fortune. But when it comes to giving away these things, we are not willing to do so. The whole secret lies there. If we could only grasp the fact that it is for us to give to others that which we expect them to give to us. We like to be in the company of a good or calm person, and our desire is to deal with such a one. In our profession or in business we always think, if I could have a righteous and just and reliable person to deal with. But when we are put to the test, when it comes to being righteous ourselves, we fail miserably. When others expect us to treat them well, fairly, and kindly, and to be stable and reliable, we forget that it is for us to show these characteristics. We think so much of our own wishes that we forget what it is that we ought to do for others. The seer, therefore, teaches that all the things that we desire and think beautiful, we ought to produce within ourselves instead of expecting them from others. What a task that is! What great self-sufficiency there would be if every country always itself produced that which it seeks from others. What an independent life it would be to produce within ourselves what we expect to obtain from others. Instead of depending on them for something we ourselves can give them, we should experience the joy of giving, the joy of being kind to others. What joy and freedom we should ourselves find in being kind to another. However natural it may be to have someone love and admire us, are we not dependent? The wife is dependent on her husband's love. The friend is dependent on the friend's love. But in the other case we would be free and independent, for our joy would lie in the love itself, and not in the person. We should enjoy life by doing kindness to others. Receiving kindness from others only makes the recipient expect more. He keeps saying, he is doing this for his own benefit, he is not considering me, he is blaming me, he did not help me, he did not deal fairly with me. His life becomes full of grudges because he expects from everybody all the good that he wants, and he does not know that he ought to have it all in himself, that he should become independent. Therein lies the secret of character. It is a wonderful thing that all that we possess in the way of character we transfer not only to our surroundings, but also to such animals and birds as may be pets in the house. If we could see exactly to what extent our character itself acts on our surroundings, we should be surprised, the effect is so great. According to science we see that the law of attraction is such that it always attracts the same elements. When we emit goodness, we cannot receive anything else but goodness, and even those who have not that element know it to be of God. All attributes and all goodness that are in the original spirit of God are in man's spirit also. However wicked a man may be, however lawless, however degenerate, if we are quite the opposite our power will be greater than his power will not have any influence on us. The power of goodness conquers badness. Badness is weakness, goodness is strength. A man who has the habit of losing his temper cannot control another person with the same temperament because he has that weakness himself. Therefore, the other person loses control also. If a man has control over himself, he will smile and be patient, even if he is exposed to rages 1,000 times. He will just wait. He who has spiritual control has great control, but he who has it not can control neither spiritual nor physical events. He cannot control his own sons and daughters, for he never listens to himself first. If he listened to himself, not only persons but even objects would listen to him. The self will never guide unless we allow it to do so. We always go astray when we are not guided by the intuitive self. Confusion always follows when we have disappointed our intuition, and failure always comes when the control has been lost. A person's weakness spoils his affairs for all the different spheres in which his affairs lie: family, daily life, business, profession, industry, and so on are all affected by every lack in his character. Do not think that a person of high position is always an ideal character. He would have come to a 10 times higher position if his character had helped him. It is the character that is our teacher. We do not need to speak to people about being virtuous, kind, righteous, for our own righteousness is enough to make them so. Our goodness is sufficient to make our surroundings good. People are forever seeking psychic power and control when all the time it is within themselves. Our self is the greatest enemy we have. The horse wants to go where its rider does not. It is the self that will not listen to us and does not act according to our wish. It is not what another person says, or a priest says, or a church says. The great teacher is both within and without. If we are willing to be guided, everything can teach us a lesson. If we wish to see the advantage of sobriety, we shall see it among sober people. If we wish to see the disadvantages of lack of sobriety, we shall see them among people who are not sober. If we wish to see the advantage of guidance, we shall see it among those who are guided. It is all a matter of experience and study, and our own guide towards our true ideal will never fail to guide us aright. We should do all that we wish others to do to us, and we should not only do what we please to others, even if they do not wish for more. All that we expect from the world we desire for ourselves. But if we acted otherwise, we should become great personalities in the world. Instead of being examples of selfishness, we should give our best in our dealings with our nearest relatives, children and friends. Life in general is like a plant with thorns. Wherever we wish to take hold, there we find a thorn. The more our eyes are opened, the more, wherever we put our hand, do we get thorns, the thorns of selfishness. For every ego wants what is best for itself and is not ready to give. Yet if we tried out of curiosity to become a rose instead of a thorn, we would make our life worthwhile. When we begin to see our own faults, then we see how much more we should deserve the name of human beings. Galib said, "For man even to become man is the most difficult of all the other difficulties in life." One day a majzub, that is, a man who has devoted his entire life to spiritual realization, living always far from the crowd, who think him crazy, was coming from one side of the marketplace when he met another coming from the opposite side. They made a little bow to one another. And it surprised a bystander to see two crazy people greet one another thus. What brotherhood there is between crazy people, he thought. He then went to the place where the one Majzub lived and sat there waiting a long time until it should please the Majzub to explain himself. At last the mood of the Majzub became such that he would speak to him, and he placed his hand upon the head of this man, saying, "My child, go into the bazaar and look at it, and come back and tell me what you see." So the man went back to the city and looked at the crowd and returned full of surprise. He was bewildered beyond expression and said, "Every face that I see has the appearance of some animal. Not a human face can I see throughout the whole city, except that of the man to whom you bowed, and of your holy self, of only these two." It does not mean that the faces were changed. It does not mean that the features became different. It means that the garb of humanity, the appearance of the human beings, is not enough. If we can distinguish ourselves from other beings, it is only in the things that animals do not do that man can be different from them. When it comes to eating, do not both eat, both sleep, both seek comfort. Man does all the things that animals do. Man can only be greater than animals in things that they do not do. And what are those things? Building houses? Birds can do this. Ability to fight? Animals and birds fight. The showing of art and skill, animals can show these things. Think of the spider and how it weaves its web, it is wonderful. Man was created in order that he might overcome that which animals have not overcome. And what is that? It is the ego. It is the ego that makes him selfish, that makes him try to get the best of his neighbor. This is the only real cause of all the disturbances of life, of all unrest, of all that we suffer, of all the harm that comes to us. The great enemy is the ego, the selfishness, manifested in husband, wife, son, daughter, friend, neighbor, or servant. Seeing how man's selfishness is torturing the world, the greatest need is to understand that no one is better than anyone else, and that no one can rightly think or imagine he can be better than anyone else, or more helpful to children or family or surroundings, until this one thing is achieved: the suppression of ego, of selfishness. Do we not fight with one another unjustly, all because of vanity? We say, "That is my thought, that is mine. Me is such that everything but me is wrong. What I have, no one shall touch." This is the one thing against which all religious teachers preach. Many people think it is very necessary to hold to self and self-interest. Yet even if man does differ from animals, he resembles them in this, that where there are two dogs and one has a bone before him, he does not want the other dog to touch his bone. Even though he is satisfied and does not require the bone himself, he still does not wish the other dog to come and touch it. "This is my bone," he thinks, "I will have it." And as long as the other dog is afraid, it is all right. But if the other dog is bigger, he will come and take the bone and bite the first dog too. That is the picture of life. Yet we see that in similar circumstances one man will say of the other, "Oh, he was so good, I went to him at lunchtime, and he was so kind as to ask me to have lunch with him." This is a man's feast, the other was a dog's feast. This is where man should be different from an animal. An animal will not recognize his mother, or father, or his birthplace, but man will. After he has grown up he will consider, "My mother took care of me when I was an infant, and was so kind to me, and now she is aged, so I will do everything in my power for her." He dwells on all the respect he can show her, and how worthy she is of it. At once he shows himself to be man, The animal does not act in this way. Hence, in the case where a man does the same as an animal and does not care for those who did all they could for him in his youth, he shows his lack of humanity. Forgetfulness and lack of appreciation of the care bestowed during childhood are characteristic of the animal. Even angels bow to Christ, and Christ is the ideal man. Angels bow to the ideal man. Even when standing on the earth below, he is higher than heaven and the angels, if only he can be man, if only he exhibits humanity. Christ said, "Ye are the salt of the earth, and if the salt have lost its savor, wherewith shall it be salted?" This explains that man is the ideal manifestation, higher than mineral, vegetable, animal, and other kingdoms, and even higher than the angels. If he loses the sense of humanity, who is to come and teach him? He is the one who is able to teach. Man is the father of humanity. If the father loses his way, where will the children go? How much depends on the preceding generation? It is to this that we always look for prosperity, for success, for the future of the nation, country, race, or family. The real welfare to be sought is not the keeping of so much money in the bank, so many houses built, such and such an education at the university. It is the benefit to the future that is the guide. Parents should think of the welfare of the child even before it is born. The child will show what he has inherited, but how few parents think of that. Our rest, our peace, our harmony, our tendency to all good and beautiful actions and things are the wealth that we can reserve for the child. The parents should know what psychic influences they can transmit to their children. The father and the mother are just like the planet which controls the souls and the spirits of that planet, but they are the living planet. Their influence is much greater upon their children. The father thinks that if he does a certain thing, the child should do the same. I must make my child follow in my footsteps, he thinks. This is fate. Is it not the fate of nation, race, family, or the individual to consider that which belongs to their generation as ideal, believing that that is the best fate for the next generation? People give their lives for the new generation, for the new hope. Should one not see that what matters is that the lives of the children should become better? The leaders of a town, of a country, are looked to as an example which the people may follow. How can one prove oneself fit for all these positions? The position of leadership can only be filled after training oneself, and not someone else. What an atmosphere one can create by one's character, what influence one person can have on another's character. "Where are you going?" asks a father. "I am going to the library," says the son. His answer expresses truth and conviction. But another who is going where he knows his father does not want him to go replies with hesitation, and he falters out the same words, "I am going to the library." The same words are used, but there is no strength in them, no effect. What power character gives, what power truthfulness gives, what power is lost when the character of the prospective act is in doubt? What fear the murderer goes through. He is himself half murdered before he commits the act, and after committing the act, he is in a worse condition than the one he has murdered. His fear, his conscience, his kindness, his justice, his reason are all in conflict. The power of character is like the power of an army. With Christ there was an army of angels. With Muhammad there was also an army of angels. He stood while thousands of people were running away. When an enemy came near to the great caliph to behead him, the enemy was afraid. But this fear was simply a result of the prophet's power of control. Personality shows what has been sown in it. One cannot pretend to be righteous and good unless one's spirit has practiced it, and that strength has really come. One's appearance and one's atmosphere can tell what one is, because man is the picture of his thoughts. Whatever he thinks, whatever he is about, that speaks in his atmosphere, in his voice, in his movements. In everything he expresses himself as he is, how far he has evolved, and how far he has not evolved. Whatever he is, he shows. How great an influence can be. There is the story of a boy who was sent to Baghdad across the desert after his mother had sewn a few gold coins in his blanket, telling him to keep it safe and not open it till he reached the city. This was a precaution against robbers, for there were no trains or cars or caravans. It was necessary to travel alone and on foot. When this lad came to the desert, robbers met him. Thinking he would not have much money, being only a little boy, they asked him all the same, "Have you any coins, any gold, any silver?" Having been trained to tell the truth, he answered, "Yes, I have." His conscience would never permit him to answer no. "Where are they?" they asked. "They are sewn in this blanket," he said. But the very fact of his telling them won the robbers' hearts and made them act rightly themselves. They said, "We would have stolen them had you not told the truth," and they let him go free. If a person thinks that God is all, but the whole world is vile, he does not worship God, for God is all and God is beautiful. God is beautiful and he loves beauty, the prophet said. And as if we did not worship it, we should not admire it in other people. We cannot appreciate anything without beauty of character. All gains, whether material, spiritual, moral, or mystical, are the outcome of one's own character, and if we have gained nothing, it is only by reason of our own character. Truth comes to man's soul, and yet truth is not the exclusive property of creed, caste, or race. We are all the children of God, the Father, Mother, Spirit of all that exists. And we ought to have such a feeling of brotherhood that we exchange helpful thoughts with one another all the time. We can take love and guidance from one another. Speech is not as great a help as contact, but the privilege of meeting one another is great. When souls meet, what truth they can exchange! It is uttered in silence, yet surely always reaches its goal. When God wants to destroy a thing, he gives it into unworthy hands. Gain and loss. To the view of a mystic, a gain is not a gain, nor is a loss, for that which appears to be a loss at one time may appear at another to be a gain. The more deeply we think about it, the more we see that in every gain there is a loss, and in every loss there is a gain. That which seemed to be a gain yesterday may prove to be a loss tomorrow, and that which is a loss at one time proves to yield a gain at another. Consequently, the mystic realizes the joy of the gain and the sorrow of the loss in their right aspect. He discerns what it is that turns a gain to a loss, or converts a loss to a gain. The more deeply we consider the subject, the more do we discern that there are certain gains which are only transient, because material, and that to attain them, we may have sacrificed a greater gain. Of course, if we do not see that greater gain, we do not mind the loss. We can only see what we have lost or what we have gained after we have discovered whether the gain we have sacrificed really was a greater one or not. Every experience in life has three aspects: that in which it is in the state of a motive, that in which it is in the process of achievement, and that in which the experience is an accomplished fact. In the first aspect, where the experience is as yet only in the form of a motive, we can have no clear conception as to whether it is a gain or a loss. We start out, for instance, with the thought, I wish to start a business, in this business I shall make a profit. That represents the initial motive. The next step will be the actual building up of the business. It is now that the gain or the loss becomes more clearly perceptible. But the gain or loss is most clear after the business is accomplished. The experience is now realized. Hitherto the person has not realized the benefit or otherwise, but in the final stage, he is able to form a true estimate as to whether the idea of his life has led to gain or loss. In life we discriminate between two things: the real and the false. We think more of the real and less of the false. We discriminate between imitation gold and real gold. We pay more for the real gold because it is more lasting. The two samples of gold may be equally bright, hence it is evident that the value we attach to things is in proportion to their lasting power. Similarly, if we could see what things in life are lasting or passing, we should discriminate between real loss and false loss, real gain and false gain. The gain or loss which is momentary is not real. So, too, joy or sorrow is a momentary state. The joy over a gain today may tomorrow prove to be a sorrow. If we knew the realities, we should never grieve over the loss of things which experience shows to be only of a transient character. On the one hand, we are working for our own individual benefit and interest, but on the other hand, there is a universal power which is more mighty than ourselves, and more just in its working. When these two powers, the causa or universal, the cadre or individual, are working harmoniously, things come right. But when they clash, that which is thought right by causa will happen without regard to what cadre may think right or wrong. Those who know this, and harmonize their will with causa, the universal will, begin to experience divine impulses, and they begin to feel every time what is and what is not harmonious in the cadre also. To such as these there come fewer failures in life. Life is easier because they swim with and not against the tide. Our sense of justice is partial, because it is obscured or shadowed by our likes and dislikes, by our personal interest and lack of interest in people and things. In the Bible it is written, "Where your treasure is, there will your heart be also." If our gain is only in objects of a passing nature, our heart will find no gain in this life or in the hereafter. Those who trust in transitory gain must accept the inevitable disappointment, both here and in the hereafter. Everybody in this world is selfish, for is it not true that the sages who renounce that which is valued by worldly people, after all only take up that which they understand to be really the greater gain? The only difference between their action and that which seems entirely selfish in those who are not sages is that they sacrifice what they perceive to be a false gain. For anyone to do otherwise is to be like the dog which was running after its own shadow. The privilege of having life on earth in this delicate human vehicle is too great to risk wasting it on something which will leave one the loser in the end, however rich and ample the false gain may appear. What gain is it to have the object we have gained snatched from our hands in the end? What gain is it to have an object which has to be constantly guarded and watched against the rapacity of others? Everyone is on the watch to take our gain away and make it his, and this he can do with any transient gain. We always desire dependable objects and friends. It is our nature to long for something we can depend on for life. Our own nature teaches us that if we realize our life's desire, that which we consider important, we realize only transient things. Has not this war shown us how artists lose their art, poets their poetry, kings their thrones, and many a man falls from his heaven to the earth, all in a moment's time? What, then, is there in this world that can be depended upon? Have we not seen how parents have even sacrificed their lives in order to give the desired happiness to sons and daughters? Have we not seen that friends whom one relies on, in their turn depend on someone else and are disappointed? When we really think about these things, we are bound to see that after all we are only like children in understanding. We think ourselves clever and wise, and yet we do not really think deeply about life. Someday we begin to think, and then we see ourselves as a parent sees his children's acts. The child thinks that sand and toys are such important things that we grown-ups attach no importance to. And we too begin to see how childish our own life is when we can assess at their true value these actions and desires, which seemed so important to us yesterday. We think little things so important. Dignity, ill treatment, insults, reputation, and what do they matter in the end? Do we not see people praised and raised up high in vanity and greatness one day, and next day they are quite forgotten? Before the revolution, every shop in Moscow had a picture of the Tsar in one window and of Jesus with the Virgin in the other. Within 3 years, what a change there was. Even a whole race will change its attitude in a moment's time. Praise, honor, love, kindness, are they lasting? Are they dependable? Are we not seeking after wealth, or fame, or love, or kindness, or some help from morning until evening? However evolved we may be with our education and experience, yet what are we really seeking? Things from which we cannot derive any lasting gain. From these false things we gain the experience that the things to which we have hitherto attached importance, and which we have valued, are things that do not last. We learn at length that it would be wise to remember that all these objects and ideals and aspirations which we have in life should be judged according to whether they are dependable or not, lasting or not. After we have perceived the truth that this or that is not to be depended upon, we find that it is not necessary to renounce them all, to give up everything in life. We can be in the crowd just as well as in seclusion in the wilderness. We can have all good things, wealth, friends, kindness, love to give and love to take, once we have learned not to be blinded by them. Learn to escape from disappointment, learn to escape from repugnance at the idea that the things are not as we would want them to be. A man can still attend to business, he may attain wealth, he can carry out all those things, but now his eyes are wide open, before, they were blind. This is the teaching of life. Thus it is that when we study life in the East, we will find that a Sufi may be a king, or he may be fakir. A Sufi may be a seer, and a Sufi may still be a king. It is not the actual literal renunciation which counts, it is the personal abandonment of belief in the importance of transient things. A person who pretends to be unselfish is generally foolish selfish. It is the wise selfish who are right. They are selfish, it is true, but they are selfish with true wisdom. They think out what it is in life that will benefit them most. The foolish selfish man never puts money by, and thus never has any to give away. The wise selfish man will obtain money in order that he can express his generosity with what he has collected. He who remains a pauper all his life has never achieved anything for anyone. Therefore he is wise who not only understands what is real gain and what is false, but also understands the price there is to pay for the gain. What determines our success is weighing whether one's gain is of more value than the price one has to pay for it, or whether the price one has to pay is greater than the gain one can obtain. He who perceives this clearly has learnt the true business of life very well. For every gain, however, there is a need for sacrifice. To gain anything we have to sacrifice something. To pursue two gains is to lose both. Therefore it is necessary to decide once and for all what is false, and then to follow the real and leave the false. If there is such a thing as saintly renunciation, it is renouncing small gains for better gains, not for no gains, but seeing with open eyes what is better and what is inferior. Even if the choice has to lie between two momentary gains, one of these would always be found to be more real and lasting. That is the one that should be followed for the time. When we take the torch of wisdom to show us our path through life, we will end by realizing what is really profitable in life and what is not. Stilling the mind. Before one can understand the use of stilling the mind, one must consider the discrepancy between advising that the mind be stilled and advising that the body be not stilled. Life is nothing but an activity in all things. Inactivity of the body takes away its vigor and strength. The muscles do not have a chance to develop. The lazy, inactive person is always suffering from indigestion or some such ailment. How then can it be that when the mind is made still it will not suffer loss of vigor and strength? Would not stilling the mind stupefy a person? If the voice is to develop, it must be used in singing exercises and in carrying out certain practices. If the muscles are to develop, they must be used. How then can stilling the mind create power of mind? There is great truth in this objection. Stilling the mind would stupefy and render it powerless, did the person not understand life's secret, life's law. It is true that in life on the physical plane our exercises and activity of the day must give place to rest, comfort, and sleep during the night. If our body does not receive that rest, it can never flourish. We need more rest than activity, we need more comfort than toil, and if we do not get it our health becomes unbalanced. So it follows that just as it is necessary for the body to have comfort and rest after toil, so is it necessary for the mind to have rest and peace after thinking and working. Indeed, the mind is composed of finer elements, whereas the body is made of grosser elements, and that makes a great difference in activity. The higher the plane of existence, the more active one is. The lower the plane, the less are the activities. That is why the mind is naturally more active than the body. Therefore, if after toil rest is necessary, how much more does this apply to mind than to body? We usually rest our body at will whenever circumstances allow us to. We recline on a couch or in an armchair after coming back from the office or work. And at night we rest and go to sleep. But when do we give the mind a rest? Rest for the mind is as necessary as rest for the body, and yet we always keep the mind in action. It is constantly at work even if our body is resting. Even if the body is sleeping, the mind is producing dreams and is constantly at work. Many people stand at their work the whole day, during which the mind is no less busy with the work on the physical planes than is the body, for mind works with body, and yet they work with the mind the whole night long. The body is having rest and comfort, but not the mind. Even in an armchair they are still imagining, still working with the mind. The mind has no leisure, it is perhaps worrying, or planning, or thinking over the struggles and anxieties of which life is so full. There is hardly ever a time when the mind is at rest, except when nature gives it a rest because it is too exhausted to work anymore. The mind says, "I will have a good sleep." And if it has 2 hours sleep only, still one wakes up with such joy and strength that all the world seems new. If there have been dreams, one can only say that one has been asleep, but one does not feel rested, because that part of the being has not had any rest. All this shows the great practical need for the mind to be at rest, for the mind to be stilled. Those who make it a principle that work is always an advisable thing are one-sided. Balance lies in perceiving that work and rest are equally necessary for good health, both physical and mental. The work of the body is sometimes kept under a man's control, but he does not keep the work of the mind under his control. This is not because he cannot do so, it is because he never thinks about it. Does one ever stop to ask oneself, why was I thinking? Was there any purpose in those anxious, worried thoughts? Was it not that the mind was just allowed to go wherever it wanted? While sitting quietly in a chair, were not the thoughts active with things that have nothing to do with my life, with things that do not matter in the least either to myself or to anyone else? It was just a waste of energy. The more the mind is allowed to go on without purpose, the more likely it is to become a vehicle or machine which all manner of influences around it of other human beings or spirit obsessions will employ instead of its owner. If the user of that mind is a sensible person, then it may perhaps act properly, but otherwise the work of the mind is wasted. In any case, it would not be a fulfillment of the purpose of his life. This purpose is to learn mastery, not to be a vehicle for others to use. He who does not direct his own mind lacks mastery. All this shows that the very first lesson that the mystic learns in life is the training of mind. It is not stilling the mind, stilling comes afterwards. The first thing is to train, to check the activities. This is illustrated in the words imagination and thought. Sometimes we use the word thought when we should use the word imagination, sometimes imagination when we should use thought. Both are different forms of activity of mind. In the first case, the imagination, the activity of mind, is uncontrolled, without our intention, and is not directed towards a certain purpose. A person may be imaginative, and his imaginings may appear like beautiful flowers. But if there is no purpose, the flowers are of no use to the plant. That beautiful things have been produced is no credit, because no one knows from what source the imaginings have come. But in the case of thought, this is directed imagination. It is a controlled activity of mind. That is why we cannot call a thoughtful person imaginative, nor can we call an imaginative person thoughtful. He is thoughtful whose mind is directed by his will, whose mind fulfills his intentions, whose mind is under the control of his intention. Imagination may be very beautiful or just the opposite. It may be right or it may be wrong. Many people who are praised as being imaginative may really be in the first stage of insanity. Only those who have controlled the activity of their minds have given deep thoughts to the world. Those whose minds are working mechanically like a machine, or just reflecting the activity of those around them, may appear to be living beings, but the mystic would say differently. For it is not till a person has gained mastery over his mind, till he is above this activity, that he is a ruling power, a true person. When we think about it, we find that all the things that are accomplished in this world are accomplished by the power of mind. As it is written in the Vedanta, the world is the creation of the mind of Brahma. That is, it is the thought of the Creator which has created the world. And if it is the Creator's thought that has created this world, then we ourselves are not far from Him. The soul of man is the spirit of the Creator, and therefore has within it the same power of creating by the power of mind as his Creator has. Whatever man creates in science, in art, in phenomena or wonder-making, in poetry, in music, in pictures, in everything that he brings into being, is all achieved by the power of mind. What is man? Is not his soul divine substance? The very word man is from the Sanskrit manu, which means mind. Man is what his mind is, what he thinks. As a man thinketh in his heart, so he is. Even the future, as well as the past, is what he thinks, because he himself becomes the image of his thoughts. God created man in the image of his thoughts. If there is any self of which one can say, "This is man," it is the mind. The three Sanskrit words mana, manu, manusya show that man is his mind, is the product of his mind, and is also the controller of the activity of mind. If he does not control his mind, he is not a master but a slave. It lies with his own mind whether he shall be master, or whether he shall be slave. He is slave when he neglects to be master. He is master if he cares to be master. Mastery lies not merely in stilling the mind, but in directing it towards whatever point we desire, in allowing it to be active as far as we wish, in using it to fulfill our purpose, in causing it to be still when we want to still it. He who has come to this has created his heaven within himself. He has no need to wait for a heaven in the hereafter, for he has produced it within his own mind now. There is a story of a murshid and a murid. The murid said, "Oh, teacher, I should like to see heaven." The teacher said, "Yes, this is the way you should meditate in order to see heaven." So the murid went and did so, but the vision of heaven which he had was not as described in the scriptures, a place where one enjoys nothing but comfort and luxury, milk and honey, marble halls and white robes, beautiful gems and jewels, garlands of flowers, and the waving of palms. He could not see any of these, and he asked himself, "Has the murshid perhaps shown me a wrong heaven? Or have the prophets given a wrong message in the scriptures?" So he went back to his teacher saying, "Now I should like to see hell." The murshid said, "Yes, this is the way you should meditate in order to see hell." And then the murid did this, and he saw in a trance that there was certainly such a place, but there was no fire or snakes or serpents or thorns or tortures or imps or flames, such as have been described to people throughout the ages. So he could not understand whether his vision was right or wrong, and he went back to the teacher and said, "I have seen in this way. I have not seen in heaven the things that are promised, nor have I seen in hell the things which are foretold as being there." Oh, the teacher said, "All the things promised for the hereafter you will have to take there from here. They are not kept ready for you, you will have to bring them with you. If you take sorrows with you, you will find them there. If you take hatred, you will find it there. Your mind is like a gramophone record, and if you use a harsh voice, the instrument produces a harsh note. If beautiful words and tones, it will sing beautiful words and tones. It will produce the same record that you have experienced in life. Indeed, you have not to wait till after death in order to experience it. You are experiencing it even now. Everything is reproduced before us now, if we would only listen to it and perceive it. Every good or bad word or deed is reproduced before us, though it seems as in a dream. If we watched life keenly, we should see how true this is. Joy, sorrow, love, all depend on our thought, on the activity of our mind. If we are depressed, if we are in despair, it is still the work of our mind. Our mind has prepared that for us. If we are joyful and happy, and all things are pleasant, that also has been prepared for us by our mind. It is only when our mind works without control that unhappiness, sorrow, trouble, pain, or whatever we experience comes without our intention. No one could wish to create hell for himself. All would create heaven for themselves if they could. And yet how many allow their minds to create these things for them, regardless of their own intention? The control of the activity of mind is called concentration in the language of the mystics. The meaning of this word is often not rightly understood. People are apt to think that concentration means only closing the eyes. But one may close one's eyes for hours, and still the thoughts keep coming like a moving picture. People are never at rest, never at peace. Anxiety and sorrow do not disappear just because they close their eyes. It is concentration that does that. Concentration is activity of mind in the direction desired. Our desire dictates in which way the mind is to be active. The mind acts according to our wishes. How difficult it is to do this is best known by those who have tried. As soon as the mind is still and inactive, it begins to jump and run away from control. It runs in every direction, but in that which we wish. We hold it, it slips away. Not till one begins to try and concentrate does one see how uncontrollable and unruly the mind is. This truth is pictured very well in the story from Ramayana, the great Hindu scripture, which tells about Rama's two children Lahu and Kusha. The myth explains the condition of the human mind as being like that of an unruly horse. Is it not always running hither and thither? Is it not like a wild horse running from place to place, farther away every time we think we are able to touch it? When a person says to himself, "I will not think of anything," do not 1,000 thoughts come? That shows that its nature is like that of the unruly horse, which needs skill to control it. The key to the problem of controlling the mind, the key to concentration, is given to us by our elder brother, the Murshid among the Sufis, the Guru among the Hindus, who is a teacher with experience of the horse, having trained it and mastered it. He says, if you are without the right friend, you will perhaps succeed in catching the horse, and perhaps you will not. But if you know the right way in which to go about catching it, you will not be long in doing so. That is why it is so necessary to have a method of concentration. Mystics, yogis, fakirs, ascetics have a method, and by learning that method, the concentration is easily obtained. When the mind is controlled and made into a vehicle, absolutely in our hand, working as we desire, then we can still it also. The benefit of stilling is even greater. If one only grasped the benefit of perfect stillness, even of only the body. We see a symbol of that stillness in the statues of Buddha, or of Krishna, or in other idols. What an effect it has! Compare it with the effect of a person who comes into our presence and is always active, rubbing his hands, moving about, raising his shoulders, making grimaces, tapping on the table, scratching, fidgeting in some way or another. Does he not make us fidget too? The whole atmosphere becomes disturbed. Why? Because there is an intense activity of mind having its effect on the body. The body and mind are both in an unrestful state, which affects everyone present, for it produces unrest in the whole atmosphere. We may not be conscious that this is so, but unconsciously we feel disturbed. The great comfort that one finds after waking from a deep sleep cannot be compared with anything in the world, but more than that, the mystic sees in sleep the symbol of a great mystical state. Rumi, the Sufi teacher of Persia, says, "O sleep, in thee I find the divine bliss. Thou makest patients forget their illness. Thou makest kings forget for the moment that they are in a palace. Thou makest a prisoners forget for a moment that they are in captivity." What bliss, what joy of bliss when the soul is freed from these limitations, from the presence of the different aspects of life that are keeping it captive. Sleep is the time when the soul is free. That is why deep sleep is so important a state to the mystic. In the East they say, when a person is asleep, do not wake him. It is a great sin to do so. Of course, in the West they cannot say this, because if he does not go to his work in the morning, what then? It would be a great sin if we did not wake him. As there is such comfort and joy and so great a secret of heavenly peace during sound sleep, so there is a greater joy and peace and inspiration when the mind is stilled. The mind is so like water that our poets always call it the sea, the ocean. The nature of water is that as we look into it, we see a face reflected there, our own image. If the water is not still, the face is not clear. When the water is still, everything reflected in it is clear. So it is with the mind. When the mind is stilled, it hears what another person says, it can ponder upon anything that it sees, and when one is sufficiently developed, the mind can hear even what is said from the other side, even what God says from heaven. Therefore it is those who have first accomplished stillness in their life, who have enabled the ears of their heart to listen to the word of God. And what an atmosphere such persons can produce! What effect their presence has! It is more than healing, more than medicine. A man with a perfectly stilled, comforted, and rested mind will at once raise up another who is going through distress, or restlessness, or pain, or ill temper, or worry, or anxiety. The very presence of one whose mind is stilled gives such hope, such inspiration, such sympathy, such power and life. All the heavenly properties flow so smoothly and freely from the person whose mind is stilled, that his words, his voice, his presence, all react upon the mind of others, and as he stills his mind, so his very presence becomes healing. Mental creation. So absorbed are people in this visible creation that they very seldom think of the value of that other creation which exists within themselves. Those outer things that tempt, that attract attention, that are of interest, are all pursued by so many persons, who therefore become limited and unaware of that other creation which goes on unconsciously within. In reality, every man is a world within himself. But how little he reflects about it. He is always conscious of being just like a drop in the ocean, whereas he does not know of the other state of being, in which he is the ocean and everything else a drop. There is a passage in one of the sacred books relating how God created the earth and then created the heavens. What does this mean? Was heaven created after the earth? The meaning is that this creation which is around us is first impressed upon the mind, and then the mind creates its own world, its own heaven. It is the creation of mind, a higher world, yet within ourselves, and this world may be heaven, or it may be the opposite. As Omar Khayyam writes, heaven is the vision of fulfilled desire, and hell the shadow of a soul on fire, which shows that the desire is the source of heaven and its fulfillment. At the same time it is mental fire and disappointment, or worry, or anxiety, or torture that is the shadow of the soul on fire. Centuries ago Zoroaster taught that there are three kinds of sin and three kinds of virtue. Those of thought, speech, and action. A person always takes virtue to be virtue in action, sin to be sin in action, never thinking about virtue and sin in speech or thought. Sometimes man's thought is stronger than his speech or action. It is the experience of every mystic and every person who has trodden the path that the power of thought is much greater than that of speech or action. In our everyday life we often find that if we think of a person bringing a certain book or flower we desire, he comes to see us, bringing this book or flower with him. We had not expressed a desire, and yet it has been fulfilled. Such is the power of thought, the creation of mind. Thoughts are things, it has been said. But they are more. Thoughts are beings. They are as much living beings as we are. They work as we work. They have life in them. The body can generate, but the mind can generate too. It is the generation of the mind which we call thought or imagination. Thought is controlled, whereas imagination is not. There is a saying in Sanskrit, there are numberless gods, and yet there is one God. This means that as every planet is a world, so every mind is a world, it is a living world. The question is, if we make our world and mold our life, why should we have unhappiness? Why have troubles in life? Why have failures in life? The answer is that it is neither the fault of the Creator nor of the world, it is the fault of our ignorance, it is our lack of knowledge. Buddha pictures this lack of knowledge in this way. It is as if you are clinging to the branch of a tree in the thick darkness of night, so that you cannot see what is beneath you, whether it is land or sea, so you are all the time afraid of falling. You keep on clinging to the tree and suffering with the fear of how long it will be before you have to let go, thinking, how long can I cling to this branch? Yet under your feet there is nothing to be seen. Such is life until light comes. Then it is like the coming of the sun. When the sun rises you find there is no water, and hardly any space, for the ground is just beneath your feet. The land of immortality seems so far from us. But when the sun of knowledge arises we see that it is near, so near. Once man knows that, he need not be taught morals or virtue. He knows what is best for him, whither to go. He knows his own creation. He knows that if he creates hideous spirits in his thoughts, they will become monsters which will work against him and will ruin his own life. But if man creates the spirit of love and kindness, others will help him in his need, and he will always be surrounded by love and kindness. Once people realize this, their life becomes different. They become the healers of men. They sympathize with the trouble of another. They serve in the difficulty of another. They seek to know if they cannot do something, cannot help in some way. A word may help. A thought of kindness and of sympathy will help. Whatever they do to others they do to themselves, because every thought of kindness or goodness or sympathy has generated a world of sympathy around it, and such persons cannot be without it. Even if they go to a land where no one knows them or understands them, they can still attract sympathy and love if they have created that within themselves. This shows how important it is to be careful of what one says. If one acts under the spell of anger, says such things as, "I don't wish to see his face," or any evil words, then the speaker wishes he had not said or done such things after the spell has gone. Not even about an enemy would he wish to have said these things. But at the time he did not realize that what he created lives. That which he has created he will be afraid of, and it will become his own enemy, as well as the enemy of the person against whom his wrongful thought was directed. Not only that, but he will generate many more of the same kind. Once one bad thought is created, in the spirit of anger or annoyance, 1,000 other spirits are created out of it. A world may be created by giving an outlet to one single weakness. All that we collect and gather in the external world for our happiness and comfort is limited. Not even 1,000th part of this world that we possess can we really call our own kingdom, our world. But our mind can create and can collect numberless thoughts and impressions, which all make up its real world. All our possessions, all that we collect in life, all these things which we shall have to leave one day are transitory, but that which we have created in our thought, in our mind, that lives. A person thinks, someday I should like to build a factory. At this time he has no money, no knowledge, no capability, but a thought came, someday I should like to build a factory. Then he thinks of something else. Perhaps years pass, but that thought has been working constantly through 1,000 minds, and 1,000 sources prepare for him that which he once desired. If we could look back to all we have thought of at different times, we would find that the line of fate or destiny, kismet as it is called in the East, is formed by our thought. Thoughts have prepared for us that happiness or unhappiness which we experience. The whole of mysticism is founded on this. If thoughts can accomplish this, so can love or imagination. Even a dream can accomplish it according to the impression which it makes. Some thoughts are like things, like objects, other thoughts are like beings. Some thoughts are like angels by our side, and some are like devils. They are all round us, either helping us towards the accomplishment of the objects before us, or drawing us back from those things we wish to accomplish. One person may think, and perhaps the result of his thought is very feeble. Another has a thought today, and tomorrow the desire is fulfilled. Why is this? It is because of the power of thought. In the thought of one person there is more life, in that of another there is less life. The difference between an object and a living thing is that there is more or less life in them. But where there is consciousness and activity we call that life, and we call that which lacks intelligence and consciousness an object. Yet in reality both are alive. A person with a weak will has no strength in his thought. If he thinks 1,000 times, it has no effect, because he has not that vitality or energy which is necessary for thought to live. What is the vitality which gives life to the thought? It is the same in man as in the vegetable or in the mineral kingdom. In one case the life is on the surface, in the other it is hidden. That is why we call them things in one case, and beings in the other. So there are dead thoughts, and there are living thoughts. To which class of thought belongs depends on the power called willpower. When there is willpower, the word is both spoken and done. This idea is expressed by the words kalpa vriksha, the tree of desire. The story is that whoever happens to sit down for a moment under this tree will have his wish fulfilled, yet nobody knows where this tree is to be found. The tree is the mind, its root is the heart. That which gives power to thought, gives spirit or life to thought, is feeling. A man without feeling is as though dead, with feeling he is living, and so is his thought. Thought with feeling is a much greater power than thought without feeling. Merely to say, I like your picture so much will have no effect when there is no feeling behind it. It is just a string of words. There is no life in it. But when these words are uttered with feeling, they go through your heart also, the thought becomes living. There have been great people whose living thoughts could make anyone live, they could impart life and heal. They have left their thoughts behind them, and people have treasured them as scriptures, as holy books. They have taken them for a religion. Such thoughts can never vanish nor die. Such a long life has been given to them. Whatever form their thoughts have taken, whether music, prose, poetry, aphorisms or precious sayings that will never die, they will live forever. There are others who have not known the value nor the immortal character of this creation of the mind. They pass through life without realizing its value. Such persons are foolish, stupid, grumbling all the time about people, and criticizing others. A Hindustani poet has said, "Beware before you speak a word. You do not know that this world is a dome, and that in a dome there is an echo." So, in this world, whatever one utters is re-echoed. If a good thought is sent to a person, he may not know of it, yet we have sent a good thought, a thought of kindness, sincere sympathy and love. We may not tell him, we may not see him, but after even 10 years we will find something was prepared for him, something has made the friendship closer. He will know that we have thought about him. The secret of this is that life is one. In it all these phantoms live and move, and we think that everybody is a different life, and yet there is only one life, which the mystic calls God, who cannot be divided. The Sufi says that man is not a part of God, for how can God be divided? Can one divide space? Since space cannot be divided, how can God be? How can this one life be divided? There is no division. There is no wall between any two people in this world. Whether the thought be of bitterness, or sympathy, or love, or kindness, it reaches the other person. When the thought has feeling behind it, it has life, whether the feeling be of bitterness or of kindness. If it is bitterness, it will destroy. But the consequence of such a thought will be that it will return to the giver, it will surely rebound, it will surely return to him who sent it. Whether it was bitterness, or whether it was kindness, it will return just the same. But more than that, this thought generates as surely as do germs and worms. One thought of love gathers 1,000 beings of love and kindness around one. There is a prophecy in the Bible that when the next teacher comes, he will bring 10,000 holy ones in his army. What does this mean? Does it mean 10,000 visible people? No, there will be numberless thoughts of goodwill and service to mankind which will become his army. Externally we are a single being, but internally we are a world. As vast as is the world around us, so vast is the world within. Asif says, "The limitation of the sky and land cannot be compared with man's heart. If man's heart be wide, there is nothing wider than this. All can be accommodated in it, heaven, earth, sun, moon, all are reflected in it. It becomes itself the whole. This world becomes as one chooses to make it. If man only knew that. But since he does not know that, the world is not heaven, but has become its opposite. We blame others for our sorrows and misfortunes, not perceiving that we ourselves are the creators of our world, that our world has an influence upon our life within as well as upon our life without. For instance, if a person is blamed by the self within, he will be blamed by everybody else, and if he is admired by it, he will be admired by all around. If the self within feels guilty towards someone in the external world, he will feel guilty, and if it feels doubt about the right spiritual path, he will go through the world in that spirit of doubt. We read in the scripture how Moses spoke with God on Mount Sinai. The angel Gabriel brought a message to the prophet. What was the angel? What was Mount Sinai? Mount Sinai is the mind of man. God is within it. It is man's feeling that builds a bridge from man's mind to the mount of God. Rumi says so beautifully, there is a flute, one end of which is between the lips of God, and the other end of the flute is in the heart of man. What a wonderful metaphor! When man's heart is awakened, when the thoughts have become living beings, then whenever this feeling comes, its current runs from infinite to finite, from the objective world back to the world unseen, from God to man. A current is established. It is man's thought which is the bridge to heaven. Whatever the thought of man has built, it becomes his heaven, with the singers, the apsaras and fair ones. This is the true heaven. A man with an army of beautiful thoughts is in the Garden of Eden. He has produced a garden within himself. There is a verse of Bettel, these beautiful gardens and flower beds, if you wish to have them round you, you need not go and see them in the external world. You need only open the gate of your heart to see them there, and you will enjoy them. People think such a world is only imagination, only exists in thought, but really this world is the only one that will remain in the hereafter. There will not be any other world, for this physical world will not remain. Every soul is creating a world. However vast a planet may seem in comparison with the mind of man, in reality the mind of man is vaster. There is a world in this planet. As the Hindus have said, our planet has a god, and man is the god of his planet. First one must know what one needs and become the master of oneself and of one's thoughts and one's life. Then one's personality will become agreeable and pleasant to others, and one will become a blessing to all one meets in this world. And that's not all. Our experts and regular viewers respond to all comments. Also check if you forgot to subscribe and set your bell to receive notifications about new audiobooks and other useful self-development materials that we release regularly. Join in the discussions, don't forget to give likes and, if possible and inspired, support the development of the channel financially. All useful links will be in the description and the first attached comment. Goodness, love and wisdom to all. And now move on to watch the next part of the video at the links below, or choose something from the playlists of the channel and those you see on the screen.